And welcome back to Community Storytelling. It's season 5. I'm Lissa Kreisler. I'm your old pal here in Los Gatos and Montecito. And so excited that we do have a season 5. All 5 seasons sponsored by the lovely Linda Lester of Lester Square. Thank you, Linda, as always. And we're on a location shot for the very first story we're going to share with you. And we're on the beautiful grounds of what was the Spreckles home from way back when. Yeah, the Sugar family. You'll get a chance to see a little bit of that. And then it became Ming Quong. And then it became Eastfield Ming Quong. And then it became Uplift Family Services. And as of March 1st of this year, 2022, it is now called Pacific Clinics. How did I keep track of all that? And I have 3 women with me today who are going to tell you the story of Ming Quong because they lived it. And we're starting with my new best friend, Elena Wong. And Elena, so this all started in San Francisco with some homes for Chinese girls who were orphans. If I have the history right, you're going to fill me in a little bit. And then eventually we ended up here. I think it was 1936 when Ming Quong Home started. And still, I think, Chinese girls who were orphans, maybe not, you're giving me that look. And then, of course, in 1953, it became co-ed and boys and girls of any culture. Tell me where I'm wrong with my history.
Well, you're doing pretty good. But the story of Ming Quong starts in the background of the mission home in San Francisco with Dina Cameron, and they rescued victims of human trafficking. And these were girls that were shanghaied or sold. And
these were Chinese Americans, right?
No, they were from China.
I did not know that
this
part.
This is 1874.
Okay.
And that mission home stayed open and did the work of rescuing victims from human trafficking up to the early 1900s. Miss Cameron, though, she was really one dynamic missionary. And what she did is she saw there was a need in Chinatown because there were children that were running loose, or they were orphans, or nobody took care of them for one reason or another.
And she focused on girls, right?
Yes, she did. And from taking care of the victims of human trafficking, she started taking up little kids, babies to about 6-7 years old, and she took her home in Oakland in 1915. All this time, there was just so many girls coming in that she kept on running out of room. So she talked to Captain Robert Dollar, the steamship magnate at that time, to donate land to buy Ming Quong Home up in the Mills Estate area in the hills. And of course, that was growing and growing. And then she found that the Chinese community said, well, the girls need to know more about their Chinese culture, and there is a growing Chinese community in Oakland. So they moved down the hill to the second Ming Quong Home.
Okay. What number are we here in Los Gatos?
We're 3rd.
Okay, so we were almost there. We were almost there.
But just before that, when the girls in Oakland had tuberculosis or had respiratory problems, she rented Sunshine Cottage, which is just down the street at 156 Loma Alta Avenue.
So I drove right by it coming up here.
Right.
Wow.
And that took care of the children that needed respiratory care.
Were we calling it Ming Quong at that point?
No, we were calling it Sunshine Cottage.
Okay.
And then this place opened up. And so in about 1936, 1937, this became the 3rd Ming Quong Home. So the girls that lived here were preschool to 6th grade, and then when you were 6th grade, you were moved to Oakland so you could be nearer to the Chinese community.
None of these girls had families?
Yes, they did. We were orphans, half-orphans, children of divorces.
What is a half-orphan?
Your mother, a paternal orphan or a maternal orphan.
Oh, right.
That means
you had one parent.
One parent. But there were numerous reasons because Chinese culture and society had changed, and there was a transition to becoming much more Americanized. So you can see that with all those kinds of problems, how Ming Quong, Los Gatos, and the Oakland Chinatown campus became what it was. And that was a shelter or refuge for about 400 of us. And we were Chinese, Chinese American, Chinese biracial girls, and then later on some boys.
Now, what year did you come to what is now Ming Quong home?
I came on a very cold day.
Really, do you remember that?
I do, and it was Eisenhower's inauguration. You can tell how I was precocious in school because I knew things like that. And I came in 1953.
And what was that like walking through, driving up here? I don't know who dropped you off.
Well, a man that I called father, but I didn't know him very well. And we had language problems because my Chinese was pretty vernacular and not proper Chinese. And anyway, he dropped me off here, and I truly was the ugly duckling. I was unkept. I had a double row of teeth because I had all my baby teeth with my permanent teeth coming in, and I was really unkept. So to me, this was kind of an exciting place to come to. I was a little afraid, and I didn't know what the future had in store for me, but it was a lot nicer from where I came from. I ran the streets of San Francisco.
Did they keep you under lock and key here?
Well, you know, the girls were so nice, and they were so kind.
How old were you?
I had just turned 11.
Okay.
And you know, because I was precocious and they labeled me bright on the transcripts, I would lead them into a lot of shenanigans. And we had a wonderful time here because it was open space, it was clean air to breathe. And there was a cherry tree right down the street there, and I mean down that path there, and they were green. And we used to have to walk to school, to the...
What school did you go to?
It was where the university school is, or something.
I think
down
where Old Town. I believe
right,
that was the original school in Old Town.
Right, it was a K through 8.
Yes.
So we had to walk there.
Wow, that's a walk.
Yeah, it really was. I thought so, especially if you're doing KP duty here because you're in trouble all the time.
Oh my God. How many girls did you share a room with?
I came at the time where there was one single room left, but most of the time there were 2 girls in a room, and we were down in the cottage right down there, and so that was the older girls' cottage. We were from about 10 to 12 years old.
And did you ever want boys? Because that was still before the boys had come, I think.
No, we didn't want
You didn't want
boys.
I don't blame you.
I mean, we were
Who
just...
needs those boys? Now, how many years did you stay here?
I stayed here for a year, and then I was moved up to Oakland for junior high school and senior high school, and unfortunately, Ming Quong in Oakland closed in 1958, and so I had nowhere to go.
Oh, I knew, I meant to warn you at the beginning that I could start crying at any time during these interviews, because my heart also rests here. Because I've done many volunteer hours at the Campbell location. So when I found out we were going to do this, I was just like so honored that I got chosen to sit down with you ladies, because what a life you have lived.
Well, there was always food. It was a balanced diet, even though sometimes we didn't want to eat the mush. But we had balanced food. We had all the books I could want to read. There were games. There were girls to play with. There were set chores we had to do. So it gave us a routine and gave us security in that routine.
Did you think back then at the age of 11, and I'll probably ask the following 2 ladies this well, look who you've become. I mean, what have you become? I know, but I want you to say who you've become.
Well, I've had a pretty colorful life too. I received my doctorate from the University of San Francisco. I have 2 master's and a bachelor's degree. My last assignment was the associate superintendent of Stockton Unified School District.
What would have become of you had you not come here at the age of 11? What do you think?
I think I would have joined a gang in San Francisco. I didn't go to school much there, but when I did, it was something I liked. If I didn't like it, you could catch me at the museum, watching a tennis match, or sneaking backwards into a movie house.
Which is why maybe you had your own room here. They had to watch over you somehow. But so you were really only here a year, but what in that year did you get from this?
Well, I have to tell you, Los Gatos has the best educational system. Because it's an upper and middle income school area, they looked at my transcripts and they moved me a year ahead. So I went into the 6th grade. So I don't know east, west, north, south. I never learned that. I never learned my 12 tables. But
me neither.
Good. I'm in good company.
Yes.
But it challenged me, and I had one of the most wonderful elementary teachers for 6th grade, a Mr. Pennerman, and he taught me how to think. Because I was the kind of kid that when I liked something and I sent in a report, has pretty pictures, all the paragraphs were lined up. It was in beautiful handwriting and maybe just copies of the encyclopedia, but it really didn't say compare and contrast compared to now. What do you think might have happened? All those higher learning kinds of questions, and I learned that here.
Did you ever meet Mrs. Cameron?
Not really.
Because she's responsible for this.
She really is. She was a wonderful administrator and a very compassionate person. Because if it wasn't a home that she opened and she had extra girls she had to take care of, there was a flat near, took her home, and the girls went there. And one of the things I remember most about living in Oakland is they had a practice that when you were 16, they would move you to be a nanny or a housekeeper in a private home. And sometimes that didn't work out.
Who had that practice?
The missionary.
Okay.
The missionaries and Donna Dean and Cameron probably started it because, in her time, she educated the girls and then gave them enough skills to be good wives in terms of mending and cooking and things like that. And there were very few. But even in the early 1900s, she had a few who became doctors and nurses and teachers because they were bright and she found sponsors for them.
Were you ever at just a loss saying, this is my life, here I am, now I'm living in this house and I don't have my family? Or did you overcome that with all the support you got here?
Well, I didn't have much of a family, so that's out, right? But the missionaries were very kind, but they also knew our capacity for learning. And for the ones who weren't in that mode, they would teach them to try their best at school. For me, they challenged me. And I got the most wonderful volunteers that came to teach me how to play tennis. And, because I was in trouble so much, I used to run down this hill so I wouldn't be late for school. And do you know, the track coach timed me and said, could you stay for the 7th grade because we'd like to have you on the track team?
Oh, my goodness, what a great story that is. But, I love the fact, being the mother of 2 daughters, and I'm about to have my 3rd granddaughter, I love the fact that even back then, was she ever married? I'm calling her Mrs., but maybe she was Ms. Cameron.
No, she wasn't. Most of the missionaries were not, or if they were married, they were widows.
But I'm so pleased that even back then she knew the importance of education for girls, that you need to be as smart, if not smarter, than the boys. And it sounds like she even knew that then.
Well, the thing is, I had to look and say, how am I going to make a living later on? And I couldn't clean very well. I kind of cheated in mopping the floors and things like that. Whatever works, it's fine.
We are the same person.
So, I did excel in school.
Yeah, you did. And look, you certainly did.
But I had a great deal of nurturing for that. They gave me books to read. They took me up to Stanford and to the University of California and said, do you want to go to college? This is how it's like. And the fraternities and sororities would give us parties during Christmas time and then introduce us to their campus. And then I got to meet some of these young people and I would say, well, what do you want to be and how do you get there?
But so I'm just thinking, this place opened the door for so many opportunities that other people didn't have. And here, I'm sure, it was a sense of, oh, these poor girls, and here they are. Well, these poor girls became fabulous women.
Oh,
yes. Oh, my goodness. You have been a delight.
Thank you.
Elena Wong, just one of our guests today. And as I said, welcome back to season 5 of Community Storytelling. I'm so glad we're all back together again. I'm Lissa Kreisler, and we're going to take a walk to Leicester Square, and then we'll be back. So here we are at Leicester Square. I'm busy today. Started with Phil's Coffee, of course. I've already ordered my lunch from Super Duper. They'll be bringing it out to me curbside. I dropped off Toby Tobes, my cat, at the vet. He needs a rabies vaccine. I'm looking at the signs. We've got an MD, we've got attorneys, we've got realtors here. Leicester Square. Linda Lester, thank you for all you do, not only for Los Gatos, but for building this square for me. So we're back. We're sitting on the wonderful grounds of what is now called Pacific Clinics. You may know it as Uplift Family Services, or you may know it as Eastfield Ming Quong, or you may know it just as Ming Quong. I've been around for all of them now. I've been around for all 5 changes, and we're on the lovely grounds of what used to be the Spreckles home. If we go back to the olden days in Los Gatos, the Sugar family. Thanks for being with us. Season 5 of Community Storytelling, and I have another great story coming for you. And this beautiful woman is Janet Chang. And what year did you arrive here?
The summer of '59.
So tell me a little bit about your background.
I was 12, and I'm at the junction of transitioning.
Sure.
So my parents I came from an intact family, but I was deeply flawed, and I fought at school. So I had 3 suspensions by the time I hit the 5th grade.
Deeply flawed. I've never heard it put like that. Thank you. I got to remember that.
It's descriptive, isn't it?
Deeply flawed.
So if somebody called me a chink or somebody bullied me, I successfully ended it. And
here I would be cheering you on, but okay, well, you were deeply flawed. You shouldn't have done it that way.
And so my mother was so frustrated.
Where were you from?
I was from a tough neighborhood, Bayview, Hunters Point, in San Francisco.
We all know that neighborhood.
Right. And
yes.
It still is very tough.
Yes.
And my poor mother was a single mother with 5 children. And here she had her middle child driving her crazy.
Her deeply flawed middle child.
Her deeply flawed. Yeah. So what happens is in Chinese families, to be called to school for your child misbehaving is the most embarrassing thing ever. And my poor mother, she'd go to school and the teacher would say, Janet did this, Janet did this, Janet did this. And my mother would just shake her head. So she sought help at Cameron House. And the counselor said, I think we'll send her to Ming Quong in Los Gatos.
And what did your mom say when she heard that?
They didn't say anything. They packed my clothes, what little I had, not in a suitcase, but in a cardboard Chiquita box banana, Chiquita banana box. Cardboard box.
Yes.
And they didn't say much at all.
What did you have in there?
Pajamas, toothbrush, not a lot.
Yeah.
No. And as I went through the gate was across the driveway then, and nobody talked to me, and I'm driving through the gate, and I said, Ming Quong home, this is not Camp Winnemucca. And I was, and the psychology of taking care of children was very different then. So they showed us around, and I lived in that cottage right there. They showed us around, and they said, well, why don't you go outside and meet some girls, okay? And again, deeply flawed, no social skills. Guess what? I got into another fight. Okay. And I came back into the living room, and my parents were gone. My family was gone. And then I said, well, what am I going to do here? It looked kind of pretty. It looked like a park compared to where I live. But this woman came down the hall, and she was going to spank me. I could tell because she had something like that. So I said to her, okay, I know I did something wrong, and I will go to my room and I will miss dinner, and I won't come out till tomorrow. But you are not going to touch me, okay? If you touch me, I'll slap you and kick you back twice as hard and you'll be on the ground. And then I walked away. And when the Ming Quong sisters got together, they said that I was the only girl that was never spanked. See, in those days, corporal punishment was normal, and she spanked you. But I internally thought, I mean, my parents never spanked me, that I wasn't going to do it. But
So the heritage and the history, when you read about Ming Quong, when you go back to 1936, when it first opened,
much different from me.
They said the girls, the Chinese Americans, because I think at that point most of them were from America.
Yes, I was born here.
And you were orphans, and that's not really the entire story.
Because it transitioned, the beginning of Ming Quong was because social services did not serve Chinese children. The transition was that the county did embrace Chinese kids. In fact, they populated here, this area, during that time that I was here.
How many girls were here when you were here?
There were 12 in that one. I think there were 12. This is a little kid's cottage. I think there were like 12 or 14 in there. And they had little beds there. And then the boys there were about 12 there too.
So by the time you got here, the boys had arrived.
Yes.
The boys had arrived.
There weren't many beds. And they were all from, basically, San Francisco there.
And they were also they had problems. Discipline problems.
No, most of them had family problems. I was probably the only one. I don't know if you call it a discipline problem. In today's diagnosis, I would have been called oppositional disorder. So, but I was a deeply angry child, and but my 2 years here.
You were here 2 years.
Flipped me around, because in Los Gatos, everybody said, "Hi, please, thank you." And if someone pushed me, they said, "Oh, excuse me." Yeah,
to this day, it's still like that.
I
can tell you that as a resident. To this day, it's still like that.
And so when I left here, I had a very special counselor that put me on a different road. And when I went back to San Francisco, I was aware of my own behavior, and I changed my direction.
So you went back to your family?
Yes, in the 8th grade.
All right.
In the 8th grade. And when I got back to my middle school, I had another fight. And I said, this girl said, "No chinks at our table." And then when I'm walking down the hallway, she's kicking me. And I said, "Oh God." So then I put my books down. I made her an example, picked up my books, and I said, "I'll meet you at the principal's office." But I decided that I could not maintain that kind of behavior if I went to high school, because the stakes get bigger.
Yeah.
They have real gangs, they have real guns,
and they're big, they're bigger people.
Yeah, right.
Yes.
So I ended up going to the prestigious public high school, but they wouldn't accept me because I had a straight D grade. But the only reason why they accepted me is because my special counselor gave me an IQ test, and I wrote a letter. I wrote a letter as my mother. "Please give my daughter a chance. She has emotional problems." And then I gave them my IQ test. And she said, "Thank you very much, Mrs. Helen Chang." And I got into Lowell.
You are something else.
I got into Lowell.
You are something else. My goodness.
But it changed my life. I learned how to play tennis. To this day, I still play tennis. I learned how to swim. I learned how to play, set a table. I learned how social skills. I learned a lot while I was here.
Did you want to leave?
Well, you know what?
I guess you had no choice at your age.
When I said about the perspective about mental health care and taking care of children, it was very different. Most of the time when there's change, you tell the child, "Okay, we're going to do this." With here, they did not. They just said, "Today you're not going to school." I said, "Okay." So then that day, I had to pack my things and I left. I never got to say goodbye to my friends at school. I never got to say goodbye to my friends living down the street. And I went back to my old neighborhood. Yeah.
I can't imagine.
Well,
I think I'd be crying the whole way home.
Well, the difference between Bayview, Hunters Point, and Los Gatos it's not like geographical difference. It's like another planet, okay? But I learned that this was a world that I wanted. I wanted a civil world. I wanted a world where I could work hard and do what I want and go where I wanted to go. And this living in Los Gatos did it. People were nice to us here. The schools, the organizations, people were nice to us here.
And I don't think, well, I don't think the Chinese American population was that large back then in Los Gatos.
There was none. It was zero.
There was none. Okay.
I think there was maybe one Japanese girl, but basically they knew, because I'll tell you what, you see that little house there? Behind there was a big room where there was used clothes. And so we would all go there to get our clothes. But in the beginning of the year, you got one pair of new shoes and one new dress, okay? So here we are. We stood out like sore thumbs because we're the only non-white in this area. Plus, we wore ugly clothes, mainly brown, okay? Where all these other girls went to Fred's shoe store and got new shoes. They went to, I can't remember what the clothing shoe stores, we were just talking about it the other day. But everybody accepted us. They didn't make fun of us. They embraced us.
And so it just bothers me so much when I consider how you were treated in San Francisco, which does have a very large Chinese American population.
But I didn't live in a Chinese neighborhood.
No, you did not. You did not. But then you went to Lowell. And I don't know the names you were called. And then you come to Los Gatos, where we don't have a soul here who is Chinese American.
It wasn't a problem here, though.
I know.
It wasn't a problem.
So that just bothers me so much, that you faced that problem in San Francisco and you didn't face it here. I'm happy you didn't face it here,
Yeah.
but you shouldn't have faced it there either.
No.
It just still bothers me all these years
Ironically,
later.
outside of my neighborhood, it was much better. Because once I went to Lowell, I met people in different neighborhoods in San Francisco, and everybody was nicer. It was the 60s by then. Like, peace, baby. I mean, it was the 60s by then. So things had changed. Things had changed.
And now who have you become? I mean, we know how you were as a kid, and now say who you are.
I hated school. I even through high school, I got very bad grades. But once I realized, hello, you got to go to work. I wanted to be a PE teacher because I wanted to wear tennis shoes every day and blow a whistle. I couldn't get a job as a PE teacher. So the next best thing, I became a nurse. And then I did not work until I was 50. And then I got my master's and I became a college professor.
Such accomplished women came out of this place.
Yeah, definitely.
And what was the tie-in here?
I think for me, it gave me confidence. I was told certain things that nobody else told me, that I was bright, okay? And because I had terrible grades all the time. I found out I was attention deficit, and I stopped being angry. That's a big step. I learned civility. I learned generosity. I learned about kindness. It was a big change. Big change.
If only Miss Cameron was still alive. Yeah. You know, she lived almost to the age of 100 in Palo Alto. And if she could see you girls now, you women now, wow. Wow.
I will say that this was, because it was in Los Gatos, this was a safe haven, a safe port for many of us who came from big cities and who came from uncertainty. And here we had 3 meals every day. We had discipline. We made our beds. We learned a lot. Yeah. So it was. If they had sent me to juvenile hall, I would either still be in jail or worse. So I was very, very lucky, because I guess they weren't going to send a 5th grader to the juvenile hall for fighting. But
well, they would now.
They would now. They would now. But,
Janet Chang, such stories. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you for asking, Lisa.
Oh, my goodness. You know what? I have somebody else I want you to meet. So stay with us. Community storytelling at its very finest. I'm Lissa Kreisler. Hi, it's Lissa Kreisler. I'm at Leicester Square right here at the corner of Blossom Hill Road and Los Gatos Boulevard. A lot of fun things to do. Ken!
Lisa,
I didn't even
nice to see you.
finish my sentence. I'm so surprised to see you. What are you doing here?
Well, we live close by and we're taking Rocky to the vet today.
So do you have time for a cup of coffee at Phil's with me afterwards?
Sure, is it your treat or mine?
It's definitely your treat.
And Rocky's coming too.
Good with me. I am so glad to run into you at Leicester Square. It's one of my favorite places.
It's one of my favorite places too, and we've been to Varenza and Super Duper and Phil's, and we love going here.
And so you know where I live, I have no flowers, so I come here to Leicester Square to enjoy all the flowers. They're gorgeous. So the motto here that Linda Lester coined is meet me at the square, or meet us at the square, or meet your besties at the square. I meet everybody at the square. It's Leicester Square in Los Gatos.
Come on by and cheers.
Yes. So we've moved to another location. Of course, this is where the young girls and eventually young boys drove right through the archway, Ming Quong house, and found out where they'd be living for the next year or two. And we've got our third fabulous alum. We've got Dale Lee. And what year were you here? Tell me your story.
Well, I was in the early 50s, so it was like 50 to 55 was my era.
Were you here that many years?
Yeah, about 4 or 5 years.
Really?
Yes.
Because Elena and Janet, I think both of them were here for a year, maybe two at the most. But why were you here so many years?
Because I really didn't have a place to go. I mean, I was, I brought here by my mother.
Did you have a single mom?
My father had passed on.
Okay.
So that's why I ended here. She couldn't take care of me.
And you were how old?
I was 5 years old then.
So do you remember? I mean, I know that's many years
Oh
ago.
yeah, no, I
Tell
remember
me.
the day that I came. Oh, it's really a big.
Please tell me about that day.
Yeah, well, I thought we were just going for a ride with my mother and my sister. I had an older sister, and we ended here, said, chit chat, and then they said goodbye, and there I was. And no explanation. I had no idea.
Where's my Kleenex? I can't even imagine at the age of 5.
I remember the first night. I slept in the big house. There's a big second floor, and I was crying. But
I bet.
And some of the other girls, came over, and they were very gentle. But
did you not even have, nowadays we call them stuffies. I mean, you just came with a box with something to wear, and that was it.
No, that was it. I had no idea what was happening, and just losing my father maybe the year before, and then coming to this situation was, very traumatic.
Did you see your family again?
They would come once a year and visit, but the hardest thing was, I spoke Chinese and English at that time. I lost my Chinese.
And looking back makes you sad, doesn't it?
It does. Because
did you ever regain it?
No. I never could talk to my mother really again.
Oh.
Yeah, because she only spoke, Chinese. And
so what was it like? You were living with the boys.
Oh.
How separated were you all?
Well, the boys didn't come to a later part of my living here. So, mainly we were in a small group of maybe 8, 9 girls that we were a pack. We were kind of the middle, section. And so, we lived in the cottage, and we all got along very well.
So this became your family?
Oh, yes, definitely, yeah. Definitely.
And when you had to say goodbye, I guess it was because of age you had to say goodbye, you went to the other home?
No, I never did go to Oakland.
Oh.
No, I was one of the few. Actually, at 10 years old, there used to be a Caucasian couple from San Francisco come up and visit the home and maybe take 2 girls for the weekend and just enjoy, a weekend away from here.
Uh-huh.
So I went on a couple of those, and then the staff here told them, well, we're kind of closing up Ming Quong, and are you interested in keeping Dale? Because she has no place to go. So that's how I ended up in San Francisco after the age of 10.
I don't think I realized that Ming Quong ever closed.
Well, I mean, they changed hands. Let's put it that way.
Yes,
yeah,
it
that's
merged,
a better. Yeah,
and
they
this
merged.
and that.
Yeah, it was changing hands.
So were you ever formally adopted by them?
No. My Chinese mother would not let that happen. So, because you have to get permission.
Sure, and she knew where you were and where you were going.
Yes. Yeah.
But you said you couldn't really converse with her
No,
anymore.
I couldn't. No, I
So
really
you would
couldn't.
just give her a hug and.
Yeah, and my kids got to meet her, and so they knew who she was. But other than that, it was very limited. Yeah.
And what became of you? Who are you now?
Well, I stayed with my foster parents, but they treated us just like, their original children. They didn't have any, but they adopted quite a few. And I stayed there until I was 21, so that's 11 years with them in San Francisco, raised in near Twin Peaks. And after graduating, I went to Lowell High School.
You went to Lowell as well?
Oh, I went to Lowell.
So did a lot of you girls go to Lowell?
In fact, all of us. There were 6 of us in the home.
Really?
And 5 of us went to Lowell High School. I went to the original one down on Hayes and Masonic.
Yeah.
And I was the first class graduating from the new Lowell, as they say. Yeah.
And it's so difficult to get into Loyal now. Everybody
I know.
will say, you went to Loyal? Wow.
I know, but it's just the controversy about that. That's,
yes.
I've been trying to follow it. And it was
yes.
really,
it's a whole nother story.
I know. That's yeah.
So looking back on your 5 years here, I mean, what did it instill in you? What kind of credit do you give your life to the Ming Quong home?
I didn't think much about it. They were nice. They took care of me. They told me how to be.
So you had to set the table. And be kind.
Right. And a nice girl. Behave yourself. So that's what I knew. I wasn't a rebel like some other of my friends.
Like our 2 other ladies we had. Yes.
I was just a
you
quiet
were a
little
good girl.
Yes.
They seem to concentrate so much on kindness. And who instilled that? Where did that come from?
It's their missionary background. I think a lot of that is from that. And so, that was part of life. And that's what I feel that they instilled in me as I grew older.
Well, actually, that's the best trait they could instill in you, if you ask me. I think kindness.
Yeah.
I wish we had more of that now.
I know. And feelings for other people. I just...
to respect others?
Yes, right, yeah. And then try to help them if they're in need, and it's always come back in kind, really.
So do you look back at your life with sadness or with the opportunities you got?
I'm a happy person, so I look back to the opportunities, and the sad ones, they come and go.
Sure.
But no, I relish on the...
Well, yes, because the opportunities all of you girls got were amazing. And so ahead of the times.
Oh yes, very much so.
Ahead of the times.
Yes. Well, because I have other friends that they were raised in San Francisco in a Chinese atmosphere, and they're so different. They had to work in their factory, or they had to, do all sorts of other things.
So while you lost the language,
yes,
were you able to keep some of the rest of the Chinese American culture?
No, my poor kids. They
I don't think there's anything poor about your kids. I've met them.
I think I have to remind them once in a while. I didn't grow up with those traditions. My foster parents, they try to instill a little bit. They would cook maybe some wonton or something. Something simple they can just. Nothing.
American Chinese food,
American,
I always call it.
There you go. Yeah, that's it.
But here you are again today. So you have kept your ties.
Yes.
And you look at this place now, and when you drive up, what do you think?
I think it's amazing. I can't believe that they have turned this culture into something very nice.
Something so special.
Yeah, it's so special, and still help children and families. And
yes.
Still worthwhile to really keep around and promote.
Yes, they've changed. They've taken a little bit of a turn.
Right.
But the heritage is still here.
Right.
And what I think is so wonderful in talking to Darren is they want to make sure they keep the heritage.
Yes,
and
that's
the
what impressed me. I mean, I knew nothing about the background until Elena would start, fishing around. And I said, you're kidding, So I start reading, and I said, oh my goodness, she's absolutely right. All this advertisement and promotion, I said, oh.
The roots are still here.
Yes, they are.
The roots are still here.
But they're still current too,
Yes, they've gone with the times too.
Right.
Well, this home was always ahead of its time.
I
think
never
that's the
thought,
best thing.
it was just a home. It was a nice place to be raised.
But looking back, they knew something.
Yes.
They knew something that nobody else did back then.
Somebody just had the right ideology.
Well,
I guess I don't know what you would call it.
That's it. That's
Yeah,
it. You're
yeah.
delightful, and thank you so much for coming back today because it is
Oh, no,
such
this is-
a special day.
Yes, this is very special. And thank you for
Oh, Dale,
spending
you're
the
so
time with us.
welcome. And you have two marvelous kids.
Well, I actually have two more. I have
well,
four.
two more. Well, I don't know about them. I know
Yeah.
about these two marvelous kids.
Yeah, no, they're
They're
wonderful.
not here. We don't have to
No,
talk
the other
about
one's
them.
coming later, though.
Oh, boy.
Yes, thank you.
You are so welcome. What a kickoff to season 5 of Community Storytelling. This has just been one of my favorite days, and I've been doing this for 5 seasons now, but I withheld the tears. I'm going to go home and cry and just think about these 3 wonderful women I met and introduced you to today, Janet and Elena and Dale and Darren, of course. And this is such a wonderful part of Los Gatos and Montecito, and I'm so glad today to learn so much, and I hope you enjoyed it too. And I just want to say we are starting a new season of Community Storytelling, and I know you've got somebody wonderful for me to interview. Maybe it's you, maybe it's your best friend. You know, I have so many besties that I think are so worth it that I want everybody to know about them. I bet you have one too. So please go online to kcat.org. I hope this sounds familiar to you, and say, yeah, I want Lissa Kreisler to sit next to me or my buddy. And let's share your story too, and let's make this season 5 the very best yet for community storytelling here at KCAT TV 15. We've talked so much about the past. I think we need to talk about the present and the future. I mean, this home is in Los Gatos. It is part of Los Gatos and Montecito. So yeah, it's going to be here for a while, I hope. We got Darren DeMonsi, who is the development director. And when I first walked up here and introduced myself, I said, and how long have you been here? And he said 20 plus years. And I looked at him and said, really? Really? Were you a kid here? Were you, And he said, no. Tell us about your attachment to this place.
Well, I started here as a volunteer, actually not too far from here, down at the pool when we had a residential cottage here, and I was a volunteer lifeguard.
So how old were you?
I was 28 at the time.
28. So
Yeah.
now we already know you're 48. Okay.
Yep. Looking for a career, I started to volunteer in the development department and have been here ever since.
Yeah, now he's a development director. So isn't that a great story? And I love when I hear about people volunteering someplace and then they move in and they just become a part of the institution. So you, I'm guessing, have had a very tough couple of years with COVID.
Yeah, fundraising during the pandemic was a challenge. We weren't able to do in-person events, but we were able to raise enough money to fund the programs to provide critical services. We have definitely seen an increase in both acuity and the number of kids being referred to us for mental health services. And so the funds are more critical than ever, and especially the school-based programs that provide services to kids in our local schools is really a very important one for us right now.
Do any kids still live here?
We have a few kids that are on this campus in what we call professional parent homes. It's a very high intensity, very supported foster care resource parent program. And they live in a one-on-one situation for a short period of time with a very highly trained foster parent.
So yes, we started out with just Chinese girls, and then eventually in the 50s, boys came on campus. But it's a different type of child and young adult and now family that you see.
Yes, times have changed, and the different needs that we need to support for our families have changed. The biggest change in our agency has been our entire philosophy about how to treat kids that need these types of services. You think back 50, 100 years ago, if there was a child in a dysfunctional home, the first thing we would do would be to remove that child from the home and to say, there's something wrong with that family and that we need to separate them. We now know that the family is the basis of strength in our communities, and what we do is to try and build on the strengths of the family and to wrap services, what we call wraparound services, around the family. So most of our services are now community-based, meaning rather than have the child come to us and live here, we go out to the community where they live into the homes to provide support services. So it's almost a 180-degree difference in the way we serve kids.
I love how you said that family is the strength of that child.
Yes, we're a strength-based agency.
That's
We're not
beautiful.
a deficit-based agency. So we go into the family and we say, look, We know that this family has some challenges, but what is working? And we try to build on what works rather than focus on what the negatives are.
And how do people reach you? Where do you get your referrals from?
Our referrals mostly come from the county, but they can also come from schools. They come from judges, the juvenile justice system, things like that, social workers. So we have contracts with the county to provide services to a certain number of kids in this county each year.
So in the old days, you were privately funded, and now you still have some private funding,
Yes.
but you're very public funded as well.
Yes, exactly. Yes, we get some money from grants and private sources. It's a relatively small part, but essential part of our funding streams. But most of our funding does come from county contracts and state contracts.
But besides the difficulties of fundraising the last 2 years, I think you've probably had a lot of difficulties with the families. Families have needed a lot of help the last couple of years.
Absolutely. I can tell you, as the father of a child on the spectrum, my son really struggled during the distance learning part. I know a lot of kids, even those that are not on the spectrum, really had a challenge with being isolated from their friends, their teachers, their coaches, and mental health issues that may not even been evident in kids prior to the pandemic are now having to be addressed. So kids definitely struggle with distance learning. I'm glad that schools are back open, but even families themselves, adults and families being laid off from work, being sick from COVID, deaths from COVID, the social isolation, loss of income, all of that led to huge challenges for most families in our society and our communities.
But you were helping these families. Where did you get those items from?
Donors. Donors are the lifeblood of what we do. We have so many donors and volunteers in this county. Volunteer organizations like the Butter Paddle, the Happy Dragon, the Unicorn have been operating in this county for decades, going back almost 50, 100 years. And so we have not only donors, the board of directors, but also a large group of volunteers that are willing to put in the hours and the hard work to make sure that the kids and families in our community that need these services are able to get them.
Butter Paddle and Happy Dragon, of course, are both in Los Gatos. One's on Main Street, one's on North Santa Cruz.
Yep.
Unicorn Thrift Shop, where is that located?
In the Almaden Valley off of Redmond and the Almaden Expressway.
I've actually been to all three places. But how much support do you get from them? Because the support you get from them comes from the community.
Yeah. Combined, they are the single biggest donors that we have in the state. And they provide an not unlimited, but a significant source of unrestricted funding for the programs in this county. We could not offer the range of services or serve the number of kids that we do without those volunteer groups. So we are enormously grateful to them. But not only that, they are advocates for our services. They are meeting people every day, talking about what they do, sharing their passion for helping kids in their community, recruiting new volunteers. So they do more than just work at the stores. They're really advocates for the kids that sometimes don't have a voice for themselves.
How did you even get those three stores to jump on board?
Well, it's a bit of a long story, but I'll focus maybe a little bit on the Happy Dragon. The Happy Dragon was a group of high school moms and daughters that were doing yard sales in the mid-50s and decided that they needed a storefront in order to provide a steadier source of income. So they actually got the Happy Dragon building, which we own. It was a feed store, and they bought it using green stamps at the time.
What a great story!
So it was amazing, and we've had the building and those volunteers ever since. But it's one of the wonderful aspects of working at this agency is seeing the depth of community support for not only Ming Quong but Eastfield. The Strawberry Festival was 40 years going. How many different families and neighbors came to that support us? The depth of support we've had in this community, particularly Los Gatos, over the years is really heartrending.
So other than those stores, and I'm not sure everybody who, for instance, walks into the Butter Paddle knows where the resources are going, where their dollars are going. And I'm not sure everybody in Los Gatos knows about this hidden treasure. And I do consider you a hidden treasure of Los Gatos. But it sounds like the community support is there.
Is the lifeblood, yes. Not only volunteers, not only our board of directors, but definitely the people, our neighbors, the people who shop at those stores, people that come to our events and make donations, and even you, the media, covering important stories like this and getting the word out. It's all important to what we do. Mental health, too often is a stigma or has a stigma in our society, and we need to be more open about talking about the struggles that not only our kids have, but that we have during the pandemic, and to try to make sure that people are able to get services if they need them.
Well, I know another big fundraising drive of yours and a love of yours has been the Archway.
Yes.
And we're going to walk down there and see what you have built with community funds.
Yes.
It's wonderful. So we're not done with this story. Community Storytelling Season 5. Thank you, Linda Lester, for sponsoring us as you do every year. And we'll be right back. I'm Lissa Kreisler. Well, we're on location on what once was the Ming Quong home, and then it became Eastfield Ming Quong home, and you knew it as EMQ. And this was not the original archway. I guess, well, we've got Elena with us to steer us through. Is any of this like it was back in 1936?
It looks something like this, but this is absolutely beautiful. That sign is completely new.
And it's gorgeous.
And they've taken a lot of the background out. That's not on there, but you could see hanging laundry and such in the background originally. But the sign completely fell off. And you know, I haven't been back since 1953.
You have not been back here until today?
No, I didn't come here. I was invited by Darren in 2017 to come to one of your luncheons. And then he notified Janet and myself that this needed some renovation work. And when I saw it, I go, oh boy.
Does it?
It does it. We used to drive to this, the car used to go right through here.
So this truly was the gateway.
This was our welcome to Ming Quong. And, you know, driving off the freeway, coming into the country and driving up this driveway, you can imagine for some of us, it was a little frightening. Because we didn't know what we were getting into. And I already was looking at how could I run away if I didn't like something.
Oh, but you didn't. You stayed a year, right?
I stayed a year before I went to Oakland.
So a lot of money had to be raised to change
Yes.
this. And I know you spearheaded this project.
Well, Darren really was the one that got
yes.
us all together. But this project was about $25,000.
Where did you get all that money?
The Chinese community, friends of Ming Quong, and our Ming Quong sisters had some skin in the game because they're so proud to being wanted here that they wanted to have their names put on this plaque too.
So you just said something that just led me to this question. How important is this property to the Chinese American community?
Well, we were almost hoping it would be a historical monument, you know.
There's still time.
Because it had a very important part of our lives. You see, it was our growth and our development, our childhood experience that made us what we are. It gave us the safety and security and the resilience to bounce back when we ever were challenged by something that we didn't know how to handle. And we did it with manners and kindness because that was what was taught to us by our Christian missionaries.
But this has become part of the Chinese American history in the United States.
Yes, it
right?
has.
I mean, this had an important place in your life and your background.
Well, also remember, in those days, in the 1950s, 1925, there were no social welfare institutions that would take us. And one of the mistakes that has been said and it's been painted as Ming Quong was an orphanage. Well, we weren't orphans or we weren't adoptable. And we did have ties to whoever placed us here. And so it was more of a home and it was a safe place to be.
So a lot has been written about the history. And I have a feeling, I mean, you lived it. You lived the history. You were here. How much of the history is correct? How much of the history is not?
Well, one of my reason for participating and coming back to Ming Quong is I was invited to a beautiful luncheon in 2017. But what I got out of the press afterwards is that the titles were Orphanage for Prostitutes and Slaves. And I said, what?
So
that's not us.
You young girls were called prostitutes and slaves?
I don't think we were when we were here, but whoever in 2005, the historians, related to what happened to Donna Dean Cameron in San Francisco Mission Home, and they tied it all together instead of later on in her work, she took in children, and then she took her home in Oakland for the younger children and babies, and still there were many of us that had no place to go, and so Ming Quong started. It started in 1925 in the beautiful hills of Oakland, and then she said, oh my gosh, the girls need to be closer to the Chinese community. They need to know about the culture because we were losing our language. And so there was a second home, Ming Quong, in Oakland. And then, as I mentioned, there's Sunshine Cottage, which the Ming Quong girls who had respiratory problems were sent to. And then, of course, here, the third Ming Quong, the one that opened up in 1936, where they separated us, the younger children, to 6th grade, stayed here. And then when you were in the 7th grade, you went to Oakland.
But those words, prostitutes, and there's another horrible word for prostitute that gets used now and then, and the sex trafficking, that had nothing to do with you.
No, it didn't, but because Donna Dean Cameron was in the forefront of it, they've misinterpreted what she did, and all that misinformation has been hearsay that has been passed from family to family. And one of your historians, he grew up here and went to high school here, and he said he knew because his father told him so, because his father was a deacon of the Presbyterian Church, and they never bothered to check it out. Well, I was a little upset.
I think angry would be a better word, at least for me.
But then I started doubting myself. I said, well, what about my background? Because I never knew my mother and had been passed to so many families. Well, when I was hired by the phone company, they had to vet us because we were in the corporate offices. Sure. And they gave me my birth certificate. That's when I found out I was a Chinese American, what my mother's name was. And then I went up to Marysville and found her death certificate. And she had a heart problem, but she was a third generation Chinese American.
So I don't know, are we going to just leave it up to you to change the history books?
No.
You could do it. You could do it if anybody could.
I think it's because of kind people like you that are doing the interview and getting the word out on Google to counteract what's there, because it is, quote, hell to change what's on the internet.
I understand.
But as more people find out about our story, I think they will come to our side and help us, because we've had little to nothing, and we've tried to make something of ourselves, our professions, and for our families. And we don't want that legacy to be passed on of orphanage for prostitute or children of prostitutes. They even went down another generation.
Well said, my friend. That was beautiful. So when you compare the pictures, you're going to see during this interview some of the pictures of way back when, 1936, when this wonderful place first opened. Take a look at what the sign, the archway used to look like, and take a look at it now. And that was done with the community and with the wonderful people who have come and gone from what was once called Ming Quong and now Pacific Clinics, of course. But this is a beauty. And for all of us who live in Los Gatos and Montecito, this is something to be so proud of.